We're going to talk today about positionality. All right, so positionality is the idea that we are situated in cultural worlds which influence strongly our perceptions, our attitudes, our beliefs, that establish our norms, our folkways, and so on. And these become so ingrained in our everyday life that we don't even think about it, right? So this is something that we want to really keep in mind, that culture operates almost invisibly or unconsciously, right? It's at work all the time. We talk about this in terms of time. We don't think about critically how time functions. We don't really think critically or reflect on how we orient to each other in space, or how territorial we are, or how we go about developing friendships, or how we greet people, or any of these kinds of things, because the norms and the practices, the regularities of our culture are so deeply ingrained, inculcated into us, that it becomes reflexive and seems natural, right? So to go outside of those norms, or to operate according to a different belief, seems unnatural. So we tend to think of culture as nature. And this is a problem, because when we engage or encounter people with different perceptions and beliefs and attitudes and so on, we think they are irrational or unnatural. Okay, so this is a problem in intercultural communication, and it's the ground for ethnocentrism. When we think that our cultural practices and norms are natural and others are not, when in fact it's all cultural. It's all socialized, it's all inscribed, it's learned, it's acquired through our socialization processes, which we've also already discussed. Okay, so this is the issue at work when we're talking about positionality, right? How we are disposed in the world. All right, so we're going to talk about perception first, up here on the screen. We select, organize, and interpret. Perception has these three different dimensions to it. All right? We select, we organize, and we interpret. And then we formulate into some kind of meaningful picture, meaningful representation of the world, or whatever is taking place. Right? So one of the things that we do tend to do, and this happens really quickly, is we make judgments, right? Through our perception. We perceive something and we make a judgment. Call it a perceptual judgment. Right? You ever make snap judgments? You see someone that's like, oh, make a snap judgment? No, you don't do that?
It's easy to tell, like, if you think you're going to get along with someone.
Yeah, or you like them, or they're someone who you want to be around. I mean, it's sensory, it's visual, maybe it's smell, right? Maybe it's their voice, you hear something. Maybe it's a style, maybe it's the clothes they're wearing. We make attributions. Like we talked about the Barnga workshop, right? We make attributions, we make judgments based upon our perception of others, right? There's assessments that may be going on as well. I mean, we have different colloquial terms related to this, right? What are they? You have any ideas, or what kind of colloquial, like scoping somebody out? You scope? That's still a word that's used? You guys with it here today?
I still use.
Huh?
I still use.
Say what?
I still use that word.
You still use it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Any other kind of similar kind of word or synonym? You scope, is there anything else you use the other word? You scoping something. Checking them out, scoping them out, whatever. Okay, so when we select, it means that we choose what to pay attention to. Some of you are, most of you, it seems like, maybe everybody is paying attention right now. You are making that's a value judgment in and of itself. You make a choice to attend. We have many distractions now that draw our attention away from what's immediately in front of us, right? Like, computers or smartphones, whatever the case may be, it dings, boy, your perception, your attention goes away, and you make a judgment to attend to that instead of what's right in front of you. And I'm in an ongoing encounter with my kids, both teenagers. They get in the car, they already got their phone out. I say, whoa, this is a chance for us to have a conversation. Yeah, right, okay, right, okay. So they're making a value judgment that what's on the screen, whatever it is more important, talking to whoever's on the screen or whatever it is more important than having a conversation with their dad. I've learned not to take this personally, right? It's just normal, right? You all engage in it as well, I'm sure. Okay, so once we select something when we perceive, we organize it and we make an assessment. We make an interpretation or an assessment. Oftentimes, again, judgment operates at all of these levels. As we organize, we put things into frames that make sense to us. And we organize what we perceive. And if what we perceive is unusual and we have no reference for it, it can potentially intimidate, right? Or cause fear or anxiety. It doesn't fit within some frame that we are familiar with, right? A practice, a belief, and so on. And that's when, especially when you're trying to adapt to another cultural world, that you want to experiment, extend yourself a little bit. Try something out. All right, so this is perception. Perception is not passive, right? Perception is an active process, and in many respects, it frames everything else, right? So to understand kind of the phenomenology of perception, what it is and how it works, it encompasses all of our being in the world, right? Psychologically, socially, culturally, politically, and so on. Okay, so any examples of this? Can you think of anything? I mean, certainly the political season that we're in right now offers lots of interesting examples of how an event or a statement is perceived and then framed or organized, and a judgment or an interpretation is attached to it. Can you think of any examples of this? Yeah.
What's been popping up all over my Facebook feed is Donald Trump said something about how PTSD is a sign of weakness in a soldier.
Okay. Did you watch the actual video of his interview?
That's the thing.
Has anybody? Did you watch it?
Yeah, but he was also talking to veterans. He wasn't just talking to like a room full of normal people.
This is really an interesting, this is an excellent example. Because, I saw that too. It's popped up over on my Facebook and stuff, and Trump is calling veterans with PTSD weak, blah, blah, blah. I think, wow, that's really weird. Why would he do that? I mean, that's really stupid. So then I found the video. I watched it. He didn't use the word weak. He was sitting on a stage with an interviewer, evidently, and was taking questions. And this is a veterans group. And if you watch the video, the implication is there. There's an implicature, right? Because what's he say? He says, yes, the question was, what about all these veterans who are suffering or are coming back? they're losing their health care benefits, they're not being attended to, they have PTSD, and so on and so forth. And Trump's response was, yeah, this is a real issue, this is a real problem. I hate to be, I'm not advocating Trump, don't get me wrong. But in this particular instance, his comments were taken a little bit out of context. He set himself up, though, he always tends to do this. But so he says, yeah, he said, this is a real issue. Some people have real difficulty when they come back from war, and God knows what they face. I'm paraphrasing. God knows what they face, the horrors that they faced, and no wonder a lot of them come back. And maybe not necessarily you, this is where it happened, but maybe all of you out here are really strong. But others are not as strong as you, right? This is what he says, and so they struggle, and they have trouble, and we need to really support our veterans and the VA administration, and that's going to be one of the priorities that I have if I become president, when I become president, or whatever. That's what he said. Pretty much, right?
They just took that sentence.
Huh?
They just took the sentence.
They just took that sentence out. All of you are probably strong.
They didn't say who was talking.
Really, it was probably one of the best moments I've seen him have, except for that, in terms of his interaction. But he always fucks it up, doesn't he? I mean, it's like some slip, and boy, he's calling veterans weak who have PTSD. That's what came out. So the implication of that statement, all of you are probably strong, but some people have struggles or something, aren't as strong or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but he didn't use the word weak. Yeah.
It's funny how they said that they aren't as strong because they come back with PTSD.
Something to that effect, yeah.
When he was given the opportunity to enlist and he said no.
Yeah, 5 times.
Just say.
So again, this is a really good example of how, a perception of what is said, the implication of what is said, is then organized in a particular way and interpreted and used as a rhetorical weapon against him. Yeah.
I don't know, just a comment. I guess it's not surprising that not. Just wanted to say, I guess it's not surprising that not many people question that he actually said that, just because he had said so many bad things about other people in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So people, if they see something
Right.
like that, just believe it.
Right. Nobody really checks it out. I just had a very
Have you seen the New Yorker, the front page of the New Yorker magazine that's coming out? Or no, it's at the Atlantic. Maybe it's the Atlantic Monthly. It's really hilarious. You have to check this out. I don't know. Maybe if there's Trump supporters in here, forgive me. But there's a picture of him walking down a runway as a woman. Have you seen this? Oh, this is great. As a woman in a beauty contest, he's kind of chubby, right? And he's got the ribbon that goes across his front, says Miss Congeniality. And it's got him, prancing down the aisle. It's really hilarious. Anyway, the poor guy, he sets himself up for this stuff all the time. Because we believe what? Based upon statements that he's made, the belief is what? That he... We talk about Hillary, too, if you want.
This common perception that he's kind of stupid.
I don't know about stupid, but certainly misogynist. Right? He tends to make negative comments about women a lot. So we have to be more careful with these ists. Sexist, racist, misogynist, because when you use that term, it immediately categorizes a person, it digitalizes them, and they can't really get out of it. Once you're in that frame, everything you say is interpreted according to that frame. Right? So, have you seen the Saturday Night Live debate skit? How many of you seen it? Seen the SNL? Alec Baldwin plays Trump. He nails it. He just nails it. You really got to check this out. Just Google it or whatever. You
Can we
find
watch it now?
it. No. If we get through a lot of this, we maybe can watch it. We can find it. It's just hilarious. So well done. Okay, so beliefs. We have big B beliefs and little b beliefs, right? What's the big B belief? Huh? Yeah,
You said big B belief?
big B, capital B.
Oh, okay.
Capital B and little b. Uppercase, lowercase. What's the uppercase belief? Uppercase belief? Oh, come on. Big B belief. What's your belief? You believe in God? That's a big B belief, right? Do you believe in the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church? That's a big B belief. No, not so much. Do you have, well, the big B beliefs are about, human redemption, and so on. So there's the big B beliefs, and certainly they drive our perceptions of others, okay? Our judgments and our perceptions of others. If someone makes a claim to be a religion that you don't trust or don't like or think is weird, then, that kind of identity that's associated with that religion is going to affect your relationship, certainly with that person and possibly others. Mitt Romney ran for president. He's a Mormon. So he is a Mormon. So his Mormon religion, really, this is pretty amazing, didn't play that big of a role in his campaign, in his failure to win the presidency. It didn't, which was, I think, a tribute to the American people, that his religion was not an issue. Jack Kennedy, as a Catholic, his religion was an issue. His religion was an issue in 1960 when he ran for president. Why? Why is being Catholic, or, in that time anyway, probably now it's not a big deal. Why was it an issue? Being Catholic. It was the main issue. It was a big issue. A Catholic as president. Oh my God. Yeah. Sorry, I can hear you.
A lot of Americans back then Protestant.
Yeah, there are a lot of Catholics too, but why were a lot of Protestants, especially, wary about a president being Catholic? What's the big deal?
They thought the Pope was going to run the show.
The Pope is going to run the show, exactly. The Pope, that he's going to have fidelity to the Vatican and the Pope, and he's going to follow the Pope's dictates about various things, policy related, that would undermine the secular bearing of the United States, the Constitution and its secular grounding, right? That was the issue about the Pope. So, big B belief certainly plays a role in our perceptions and our judgments of others. And of course, we have long histories of this, the persecution of the Jews, the current persecution of Muslims, and the discrimination against Muslims based upon extremist acts. So certainly big B beliefs play a role. But in everyday life, it's the little b beliefs that matter, right? It's the little b beliefs. What you believe is going to happen, or what you believe is the case with somebody else. Okay? Can you think of any examples of that? Little b belief. Yes.
Jam grades.
Pardon?
Jam grades.
Exam grades, yeah, okay, but intercultural.
Oh. Like, this person might threaten to take my wallet even though they're just trying
All right, so you believe that someone is a thief, right? The way they're acting, that they can't be trusted, that they might take something from you. All right, what's another example interculturally of the operation of a little b belief? Yeah. You believe that other people will or should understand English if you're traveling overseas, that you're going to be able to get by with English. You're not going to have to worry too much about speaking the foreign language. Right, that's a belief. What else? How about how people are dressed? You make attributions based upon how people are dressed? Yeah? You develop some belief about somebody based upon their style? You know, you have experiences, right? And based on those experiences, you develop beliefs. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story now. I can tell you're already bored. Ready? This is about being in Japan. I've been there for just a couple months. I'm on a train. Late at night in the countryside. Nobody else is in the car. Just me. Right? This is in Chiba Prefecture outside of Tokyo. 2-3 hours outside of Tokyo. I've gone down to Sumitomo. Done my class, and I'm on my way home. I'm sitting there, by myself, empty car, 9 o'clock at night. The door opens from the other car. In walks this guy. Okay? Crew cut hair, kind of macho appearance. I just look at him, our eyes meet. He comes over. Who can I use? Can I use you? You're me. I'm him. You ready? This is not fun. You okay? You look like you can. You ready? He comes up to me and he starts swearing at me this close in Japanese. And I made a mistake. What was my mistake? Same mistake you're making now.
Look down.
No, you looked at my eyes. You made eye contact. What did he do? He got a big hocker in his mouth and spit it and hit the window right next to me. And it was at that moment I decided to look down. You don't want to get in a fight when you're overseas. You know that, right? You never want to, especially if someone is standing over you and you're kind of in this. I looked down and he walked away. Fortunately, none of his spittle hit me. I don't know how he managed to do that, but what would you do? You kick him, right? You kick him right there. Yeah. Well, the temptation is very strong in these situations where you want to engage in some way. He walked out. This was a right-wing extremist, you know, who still believes in security of Japan and hates Americans. Perhaps his father was killed in World War II, or God knows, you know. Maybe he was mafioso. I didn't really notice whether his finger was cut off, because it's the Japanese mafioso, they have this portion of their left little finger chopped off. And that's an indicator of their mafioso, yakuza affiliation. So, a few weeks later, I'm on a train in Tokyo. And I'm, it's the Yamanote line, and there's a lot of people on the train, it's not too crowded. This guy comes up, sits down next to me.
Wait, same guy?
No, not same guy. Different guy. Different Japanese guy. I mean, it's really unusual for Japanese to, in public, just anonymously to start talking to you, or addressing you. And so this is, again, I've just been in Japan for a few months. This guy comes in, he sits down next to me, right next to me on my seat, and just starts staring at me like this. He doesn't break the stare. I'm looking straight ahead. I'm going, oh, shit. Kind of looking over at him. He's just staring at me. He's got a big smile on his face. I can tell. Big smile. This is guy, I mean, he's just a classic, Japanese guy, right? Fine, so my belief is, oh no, I got another one. Because this is really unusual for this kind of staring, And I look over at him, he has this big smile on his face, and he says to me in perfect English, "Y'all from America?" "I'm from Georgia. I just got back to Japan. I've been in Georgia for 12 years. Wow, it's so great to see an American here in Tokyo." I mean, beautiful, perfect Southern accent. I'm like, you gotta be kidding. Yeah, I'm an American. All right, so my belief was not upheld. But you can, based upon the appearance of the person in Japan, the man, how they look, whether or not they're going to be aggressive. After I'd been there 3 years, my Japanese was good, good enough to handle myself. My brother came to visit. We were on a train out in the remote part of Japan, and a guy, like the one had confronted me originally, was harassing him. And I came up and just let him have it in Japanese, and he backed off. Okay, so I intervened in a potential confrontation between this other right-wing extremist Japanese guy and my brother, who wasn't going to take anything. It's like, oh my God, So I got between them, and I just, in Japanese, and the guy just, took off, left us alone. So there's we build up our beliefs about how others act or potentially will act based upon our experiences in the society. Okay, so attitudes come with that. If we have a negative experience, we're going to develop a bad attitude towards the people. If that experience continues, then the attitude is going to become really sedimented and very difficult to shift, because the belief itself that's associated with the attitude is hard. All right, so the attitude is a predisposition to respond positively, negatively, or neutrally to certain objects or practices, or persons. All right? So, for Japanese, let's just stick with the Japanese example for now. For Japanese, they see an American as an opportunity to practice their English. So sometimes in cafes, and there'll be other times on trains too, where people would just come right out and say, could I practice my English with you? And at first I was like, okay, sure, let's practice it. But after a while it became a little annoying. But the belief that and the attitude that drove that question was that Americans are congenial and they're willing to speak English and get to know other people, okay? So this is the Japanese, and if you speak Japanese don't expect Americans to be speaking Japanese. So if you do, they're like, wow, your Japanese is really great, the attitudes, at least at that time, of Japanese towards Americans were very, very positive. Very positive. The negative encounter that I just described is very rare. Very rare. Although there may be indifference, or, in public, I'm talking about, not in private. If you're affiliated with a school or a business, government, or whatever the case may be, and you're working with Japanese, the reception is always just phenomenal. Very polite, very engaging, very receptive, bringing you into the group and into the team. Okay, so a value, cultural value, is a shared idea about what is considered important or desirable. Values also influence the process of intercultural communication. We didn't see the video, unfortunately, but we see this in everyday life. Values are arranged hierarchically. Not all values are equal. Not all values are equal. Sometimes values conflict. Right? How many of you think that honesty is like a top value? Maybe one of the most important values. Yeah, I agree. Honesty is really important. But now raising your hand, we just don't think honesty. I think most everybody thinks honesty is important, right? What about loyalty? Loyalty is important. Raise your hands. Okay, now let's have a situation. Loyalty is important. Loyalty, solidarity is kind of the same, right? So now your best friend, yeah.
You said not all values are equal and like you said something after that?
Some have more salience, or you have to make a choice sometimes between the values. Loyalty and honesty is a good example of how sometimes those two can conflict.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Can you think of an example of how loyalty or solidarity and honesty conflict? Two important values you've all said. Any examples? Don't you hate it when someone says, I'm going to tell you something, don't tell anybody? Right? So what are they doing? They're drawing on your loyalty. They're drawing on your loyalty value. Or maybe you say that to somebody else. I'm going to tell you, I don't do this anymore. I gave this up years ago. But I don't tell anybody anything unless I know it's going to travel, you know. I mean, give me a break. Confidentiality stuff. Especially under circumstances where you're demanding total. So what happens? I'm going to tell you something, but don't tell anybody. This is really confidential. Okay, all right, what is it? Well, blah, blah, blah. You got to be blah, blah, blah? Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Wow. Oh, geez. And then, you know, a few days later, somebody comes up to you and say, hey, did you know about blah, blah, blah? Oh, no. Now you're faced with honesty issue, right? You know about blah, blah, blah? Oh, no. I don't know. You're lying. No, I have no idea. I didn't know there was blah, blah, blah. But now you're lying because you do know about blah, blah, blah. So you just chosen loyalty over honesty. Or you can say, yeah, I heard about blah, 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 but I wasn't supposed to say anything. Now you've chosen honesty over loyalty. So these are values that clash. We carry these values into intercultural contexts. In Morocco, for example, what's said in private is expected to stay in private. It's not public information. So if somebody confides something to you in private, especially if it's political in nature, you don't go out into public and tell everybody that this is what somebody told you, or this is what someone believes, or what their political, their true. You don't do it. It's a violation. So even if you're confronted with it, you say, well, you know, you have to ask him, or you have to ask her, or I don't know about that. Okay, so you dissemble a little bit, maybe, but you don't break that strong, because of the authoritarian context, political context in which Moroccans live, authoritarian or semi-authoritarian context. What is said in private stays in private. You don't publicize the family's perspective or issues or practices or anything else. Okay? Especially with politics, but also like religion. You know, who fasts and who doesn't fast during Ramadan. You know, that's not to be known. That's private. That's a private thing. Okay, so this really drives the social world, and it's really important. In Japanese, again, I keep going back and forth between these two because I know the most about them, but in Japanese there's actually two terms that are used to describe the difference between what you really believe and what you let people believe you believe. What you really hold as a value and what, well, let me qualify that a little bit, okay? The value is that you recognize what is private and what is public. In Japanese, hone means my private belief or feeling or attitude. And tatamai is what I reveal to the public. Right? And this plays itself out in interpersonal relationships and in business relationships and other relationships. Because the idea is to save face and to, enhance the group. The idea is to the group is primary, it's sociocentric. The group is primary. And if you go against the group, it's not good. They have a saying, the nail that sticks out gets hammered. So you may want to express your personal belief or view or attitude or feeling, but you do it privately, you don't do it publicly. The nail that sticks out gets hammered is a value. It's not a belief, it's a value. It's a sociocentric value that you don't go against the group. You can influence a group, but you do it individually, privately, one-on-one. And if, the group is going against you, you go along, you put out your takamana. You don't demand this view and try to persuade everybody else in the group in a public context, in a general meeting. Okay, so we have many values. There are terminal values like world of peace, national security, liberty, justice for all. These are all terminal kinds of values. And we have instrumental values like honesty and solidarity and trust and so on. Right? So every society, every cultural group is going to have different arrangements of values that are most important to them. And they're hierarchically arranged. And it's really important for you in adapting to that culture to come to know what those values are and how they relate to each other in certain situations. It's not always self-evident. It's not always self-evident. Okay, norms. Cultural, a terminal value is like an ultimate value that you want. It's like salvation, redemption. These are ultimate values. A world at peace, a world of beauty, national security, liberty, freedom for all, equality. These are ultimate values. Okay, whereas honesty, solidarity, trust, and so on, these are instrumental values. In other words, they're operative in everyday life, in our interpersonal relationships, in our relationships with colleagues, and so on. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Saving face is an instrumental value. Okay, not going against the group is an instrumental value. Okay, norms. A norm is a shared standard for accepted and expected behaviors. There are three main categories: folkways, mores, and laws. So this is part of the chapter for today. So what's the difference between these three kinds of norms? Folkways, mores, and laws. Yeah, Andrew?
Folkways are just kind of known. Sometimes they're not as severe of a punishment for knowing.
Okay, not a severe repercussion or punishment if you go against the folkway. What's an example of a folkway? Yeah. A little higher? Yeah, right, it is. So can you give me an example? Yeah.
The way people dress.
Okay, all right, sure. So it's that can bleed into a more, moral and immoral ways of dressing, for example, right? So, and there's norms associated with that that are a little bit more stringent at times. Yeah.
Did you say folkways were?
Folkway is a everyday cultural way of doing things that doesn't rise to the level of a moral code, which is a more or a law, right? But it's part of our everyday habits, the folkway, ways of doing things in everyday life. Any other examples? Oh, come on. Folkway. You're involved in folkways right now, yeah. Can't hear you. Same please and thank you. Okay, right. Okay, it's a folkway. I mean, it's not moral. It's not a law. You're not getting arrested if you don't do it. But it's expected, right? And if it doesn't happen, then you're like, well, yeah, you're welcome.
What is the level of punishment for morals? Because it's not getting arrested, but it's a little more than.
No, you just go to hell.
Oh.
So, you're free from the cops, no problem. Awesome. We'll get to more in a minute. Okay, hold on a minute. Folkways, more folkways. Any other folkways? Yeah.
How people eat.
How they eat. Okay, good. So, for example, how you eat. What's normative about how you eat? Forks.
Using our hands.
All right. Yeah.
It could be like sitting down at a table and maybe going to McDonald's or Burger King maybe like one night a week.
Maybe, yeah. Okay, sure. I'm gonna stick with the knife and fork. So I'm out with a German friend. We have some German friend the other day, and she, actually a former master's student, we met up and we're eating and we ordered wings. Other mores. Yeah.
I don't know if this would be appropriate or but breastfeeding
Breastfeeding is a folkway.
is.
Now, I mean, for some people, it may rise to a moral. I can see that could potentially rise, but there's no "thou shalt not breastfeed," right? Or "thou shalt breastfeed." So you have to think of the mores kind of in this "thou shalt" or "thou shalt not," and there are specific prescriptions and proscriptions associated with these mores that if you violate them, you might be outcast, right? You might. There's a don't steal. Yeah.
I was going to say being LGBT in a conservative country.
Right. I mean, there's a more again in a very conservative country. But Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, said there are no gays in Iran. Right? We don't have homosexuals in Iran. Well, of course they do, but there's this strong proscription against gay, lesbian in Iran that nobody will come out for fear of being arrested. I mean, the moral police, there's a moral police force in Saudi Arabia and in Iran that will sanction people for moral transgressions. It's a moral prescription in Muslim countries to fast during Ramadan, during the day, during Ramadan. Not fasting during the day is a moral transgression. And if it gets out that you're not fasting, you could be you might be inviting the police to your house. All right? So there is they vary. Muslim countries vary. Some are more liberal. Tunisia, you can eat during the day in public in many instances. Not so in Morocco, which is also considered a pretty liberal Muslim majority country. Right? So these are certainly examples. What else? Moral principles. Want to bring up Trump again? Is it immoral to not pay taxes? No, it's not immoral. It should be. He did it legally, evidently. Right? I mean, when was the last time you wrote off $900 million? So people look at that and say, but he said, hey, no, it's because I'm a genius. I'm a tax genius. Well, his accountant is a tax genius, but he's the businessman. So there might be some questions raised, but it's legal. It's a practice. He did it. He's managed it. And evidently not done anything illegal. So, his supporters are saying, hey, I don't want to pay taxes, I don't have to either. So he's a good model for me. All right, so it's not moral, right? Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Like rape, that's like morally wrong.
It's morally wrong.
In my opinion, but
wrong. It's wrong.
so it's okay. So things like that, just they're in all three of them. like
You bet.
stealing or
Mhm.
robbing someone or something
Yeah.
like that, that's morally wrong, but it's also lawfully wrong
It's all
too.
illegal. Oftentimes, the law is catching up with morality. I mean, the law is built on moral codes. Okay? So we know morally that kind of a quid pro quo sexual harassment situation is morally wrong. And it was, forever. But the law didn't catch up with it until the 1980s in this country. And it still hasn't caught up with it in other countries. Okay, so there's a moral proscription against that. But the law took a while to catch up with it and recognize it as something other than just an interpersonal situation. It's now recognized as an organizational, institutional, legal issue. Okay, so laws are written down. Laws are a brute force. You violate the law, you risk arrest. Right, so it's related to criminality. And law is built on, in many instances, not all certainly, but on many instances on moral codes. Okay, now laws are going to vary from culture to culture, from society to society. Laws. And knowing what those laws are is written in your passport. You have to know the local laws. And the United States of America is not going to come bail you out of jail if you violate the law. And we might see the law in another country as being silly. You can't chew gum in Singapore. Oh, that's silly, right? Well, don't test it.
What's the reasoning for that?
It sticks everywhere. It's dirt. It's clogs things up.
So they banned them.
They banned gum in Singapore. Don't chew gum in Singapore. Okay? Promise? Don't do it. Not a good thing. So we may think some laws are not worth abiding by because we don't abide by those laws in our own country, and that's a mistake. Now, there may be some instances, we'll talk about this a little bit later, actually towards the end of the course when we get to the chapter on ethics, because there are cultural defenses. Now, there's a specialty, legal, called cultural defense, that if the person in this country is an immigrant and they're abiding by a law from their own country or a practice is considered legal in their own country, and they're doing it here based on that, arguments are developed to support them. And that we run into all kinds of problems with that. And we'll talk about some of those instances later on in the course. Okay, so folkways, mores, and laws. Y'all got it? Any questions about any of this? All right, a worldview is the overall way that people see reality. All right, there's I have a handout on worldview that I'll bring next time. It's the overall way in which we are disposed, that we engage in the world and filter the world through our beliefs and our attitudes and our perceptions and the norms that we operate by. The folkways and mores and the laws that we operate according to. All of that together as it operates with us in our own everyday conscious experience is a worldview. A lot of times worldviews are expressed through religious orientation, that there's a Christian worldview, or a Muslim worldview, or a Jewish worldview. And it's linked to history, it's linked to, as well as to belief, and to different proscriptions and prescriptions and so on. There's a Hindu worldview. There's an Afro-centered worldview, African worldview. These are all different ways in which people establish their own identity, but also relate to others in the world. Okay? So, and it creates what we consider to be a cultural gaze, how we look out into the world, how meanings are generated, and how we create kind of maps of the world. Okay? Any questions?
Do politics count in the world?
Sure, I mean, there's a worldview associated with different political parties, absolutely. All right, so you have a libertarian worldview, okay, different than a more, let's say, leftist worldview that's socialist based, or whatever. That's a different kind of orientation. One, libertarian is freedom, not much government. More isolationist in terms of relationships with the rest of the world. Where socialist is more community based, bigger government, and so on. So these are certainly political worldviews, absolutely. Okay, so Raphael, you want to shut that down? And once you pull up the Trump